Cada votante necesitamos la representación y cada voz necesitamos escuchar.
Me llamo Julián Castro y estoy postulando por presidente de los Estados Unidos.
You know, Poppy, what was also remarkable last night was just seeing the diversity on stage. We had a number of candidates that were candidates of color. We had 3 women. Just a great snapshot, I think, of the changing demographics of the Democratic Party. Poppy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the embrace of that by the party, right? MJ Lee, thank you. Great reporting. Let's talk about this now. Senior political analyst Mark Preston has slept an hour, but he's here. New York Times political reporter Lisa Lair and CNN national correspondent Athena Jones. Thank you all for being up early with us. Mark Preston, to you. Speaking Spanish in that way, a number of them shows the changing demographics, shows the embrace from the Democratic Party of it. Right. I kept wondering, did Section 1325, which I bet a whole lot of folks Googled last night, did that on immigration become a new litmus test for these candidates?
It very well could be. It's something that I don't think people were necessarily prepared to weigh in on. I don't think Beto O'Rourke was necessarily prepared to weigh in on that and to get into a fight with Julian Castro or a debate last night. But it could be, because now the gauntlet's been thrown down, and are you for it or are you against it?
Should it be a criminal act to illegally cross the border or not? That's the basic question.
Which is a law that goes back to the early 1900s that wasn't really enforced until, fairly recently.
Yeah, exactly. Lisa, to you, one thing that struck me as well is that transgender rights really rose to the fore on the national stage for the first time in a presidential election last night, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, we really had never heard that many mentions of transgender rights. I think that's a sign of 2 things. First of all, how that issue has gotten a lot more prominence in American life and American culture since the last presidential cycle, but also where the Democratic Party has moved and who they feel they need to speak to, and that on a lot of these issues, such as LGBTQ rights, the goalposts have moved a little bit to the left, and it's not the issue of gay marriage feels fairly settled in the party. So what's the next frontier? And you see that not only on, on issues like gay marriage, but on other issues as well.
Yeah, for sure. So Athena, to you, Julian Castro, clearly the breakout last night. He thinks he did really well. He told New Day this morning, quote, "Clearly I had a good night." The question becomes, is it enough to give this momentum legs? Can he fundraise enough to meet the qualifying factors for the future debates? Where does this go?
Well, certainly that's the big question. But if you ask the question of who made the most of their moment, who made the most of their minutes, who was able to deliver a vision to the American people, and who seemed most prepared, Castro is the answer to all of those questions, along with a few others and some examples. And so this was his moment. We'll have to see if this means he's caught fire here. But it's interesting when you look at the time breakdown. He had about 9 minutes. He was able to not only talk about his biography, talk about being raised by a single mother, talk about things like the Equal Rights Amendment and reproductive justice. These are the kinds of things that are getting a lot of attention in the Democratic Party. And so he certainly hopes that this means he's going to get a new look. And we do know that already from Google Trends, the number of searches, the number of people searching him grew by several thousand% last night.
Yeah, noteworthy as well to have 3 women on that stage tonight. Last night, of course, and then tonight as well. Kamala Harris will be up there, Kirsten Gillibrand. Mark Preston, to you, Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, seen by many, talked about by many in the early days of the campaign here as, someone who's a bit more moderate, who has won Republican districts, who has worked with Republicans. Did that help her or hurt her last night? Because she had some one-liners about beer and foam and deer country and, that you think would be more palatable to some of those voters in the middle. Did it work?
It might have worked with some of those voters, but if I could group her together with Tim Ryan, with somebody who you did a town hall with and you saw him in action when he was solo, I think that both of them, were trying to play to middle America, trying to play off
from,
these.
Right?
Correct, because they're representing who they represent, right? They are who they are, and they were trying to be authentic. Having said that, I think there was a bit of nervousness on both of their parts last night that certainly showed through at the beginning. And when someone like Julian Castro comes in and really takes over the stage, doesn't command the stage, takes over the stage, it's hard to break through.
That's interesting because remember, Senator Klobuchar's real breakout moment was during the Kavanaugh hearing.
Right.
And we maybe didn't see a moment like that last night from her?
No, I don't think so. But again, 10 people on the stage, very difficult. But she had the opportunity, though, to be the voice of moderate politics, right? Because Joe Biden's supposed to be that voice tonight. I don't know if that broke through.
Okay, stay here. Don't go anywhere. We have a lot more to talk about on this front. Also, this is a big morning, folks, for the law of the land. What will the High Court decide in some key cases? The Supreme Court is set to issue key rulings. This is the final day of its term. Those decisions have major, major consequences for all of us. Jessica Schneider has been following all of it. Jess, no one knows this stuff better than you. What are we going to get today?
Well, Poppy, for a court and particularly a Chief Justice who have really stressed the apolitical nature of the court, the cases to be released, to be decided today really have major political implications. And front and center is this decision as to whether or not the Trump administration can add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. Now, this case was argued in April, and at the time, the conservative justices really seemed to indicate that it was well within the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross's right to add this citizenship question to the census. But since then, the ACLU has discovered this trove of documents that they say proves an improper political motivation in adding this question. Specifically, they point to a study from a now deceased Republican redistricting expert who said that by counting only the citizen voting age population, that it would significantly advantage Republicans and non-Hispanic whites. Now, that evidence was not considered by the Supreme Court at arguments, and that's exactly why the ACLU has asked the court to delay its decision until more fact-finding can be done. It's unclear if the Supreme Court will do that. But on another front, the ACLU is also asking a Maryland judge to step in here by tomorrow to stop this question from being added. That's happening on a totally different track from the Supreme Court, so that's complicating things as well. And Poppy, there are other major decisions with political implications too. We're waiting for a decision on extreme partisan gerrymandering. That's when politicians could go too far in drawing those district lines for political gain. There's also 3 other outstanding opinions, so a lot of open questions here, Poppy, but we should get more answers today at 10 a.m. Poppy.
47 minutes to go. Really important things that will change a lot for people in this country. Either way they're decided, you'll be there. Jessica Schneider, thank you so much. Still to come for us this hour, he was not in the room, but for some candidates, President Trump was front and center in the debate last night. The candidates' strategies on going after the president next. And CNN takes you inside of that controversial migrant detention facility in Texas, where reports of incredibly poor conditions, especially for children, have sparked outrage across the country. What our reporter, Nick Valencia, saw firsthand. Plus, E. Jean Carroll, the woman who was accused the president of sexually attacking her, told 2 friends about it at the time that she says this happened, and those women are speaking out today.
My experience with USA Air has been excellent. They really appreciate the military family, and it really shows.
With all that USAA offers, why go with anybody else? We know their rates are good. We know that they're always going to take care of us.
It was an instant savings, and I should have changed a long time ago.
It was funny because when we would call another insurance company, they would say, oh, we can't be USAA.
We're the Weber family.
We're the Tennies.
We're the Hells, and we're USAA members for life.
Get your USAA auto insurance quote today.
He got money for his birthday, and he was like, Mama, I want to start a clothing line.
Hey, what's going on? My name is Trey Brown. I'm a 13-year-old entrepreneur, CEO of Spurgo, designer clothing that means something, staying powerful and courageous at all times. A lot of my mentors, they teach me about credit, investing, charity.
Trey inspires greater possibilities.
They always say slow feet don't eat, so I got to get to it.
Carvana is 6 years old this year and is the fastest growing place to buy a car in the nation. It's because we have thousands of people working hard to make our customers' experiences the best. It's because we have tens of thousands of cars ready to be delivered to your doorstep. And it's why hundreds of thousands of happy customers have ditched the dealership and bought their car online, earning us an average 4.7 stars in the process. So if you didn't know about us before, you do now. We're Carvana, and we want to give you the car buying experience you deserve.
See the far side of a mountain, swallow the sky. As you travel through the valley, as you're speeding.
The 2019 Infiniti QX50. Luxury should be lived in. Lease the all-new Infiniti QX50 for $379 a month.
Health is magnificent. So are the traits you love about your breed. But behind them are health needs you may not see. Royal Canin believes in tailored nutrition to ensure his long back and playful spirit get the joint support they need. Or to help this gentle giant keep her heart going strong. We've developed over 200 formulas to support the magnificence that makes them, them. Find the right formula for your pet at royalcanin.com.
It's time for our lowest prices of the season on the Sleep Number 360 smart bed. It senses your movement and automatically adjusts to keep you both comfortable. The Queen Sleep Number 360 C4 smart bed is now $12.99. Save $400 plus 0% interest for 36 months and Saturday.
With summer comes expectations. To be a better person, maybe fall in love. You just never expected to find those things at Arby's. Until the pecan chicken salad sandwich came along.
Arby's, we have the meats.
For sandwiches.
Welcome to Fowler, Indiana, one of the windiest places in America, and home to 3 BP wind farms. In the off chance the wind ever stops blowing here, the lights can keep on shining thanks to our natural gas, a smart partner to renewable energy that's always ready when needed. Or not. At BP, we see possibilities everywhere to help the world keep advancing.
Search for a really strong glue that's clear.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Clear glue. Clear Gorilla Glue.
Of course. Gorilla Glue strength in a crystal clear formula for the toughest jobs on planet Earth.
The movies we love and the stories behind them. A new CNN original series premieres July 7th on CNN.
All right, welcome back. So the first Democratic debate exposing the playbook for these Democrats. But ripping Trump, that's a strategy most of the candidates really didn't take on last night. 2 Democrats often targeted by the president himself, Elizabeth Warren and Bill de Blasio, didn't mention the president at all. Senator Amy Klobuchar took aim at the president 9 times.
We know that not everyone is sharing in this prosperity, and Donald Trump just sits in the White House and gloats. The point is, Donald Trump told us when he got out of it that he was going to give us a better deal. I'm someone that can win and beat Donald Trump. I have won in the reddest of districts, ones that Donald Trump won by over 20 points.
All right, back with me, Mark Preston, Lisa Lara, Athena Jones. So, Mark, it sort of seems like you've got an advantage if you're going tonight because you got to watch last night. So, what do the candidates tonight on the stage take away from the 10 Democrats last night?
Right. So an interesting question. I was talking to some of the campaigns last night in real time as they were watching this. And from my takeaway was they were changing their debate plans, meaning what they were preparing for is not necessarily what they saw last night. So I do think you're going to see a couple of things tonight. One, you are going to see this debate get hot a lot faster.
Interesting.
Because
like
it was
jumping in.
Correct. Because last night it took a little bit, but once people saw that it worked for them, you're going to see that tonight as well. I also think tonight that you were going to see the likes of Bernie Sanders really try to distinguish himself as the liberal voice. He doesn't want to cede that to Elizabeth Warren, and then he looked over his shoulder, and Bill de Blasio, while he's way behind him, way behind him, was trying to make a play for it.
That's absolutely true, from his first remarks to his closing statement last night. So listen to this. This struck me. I think, John Delaney had to make a name for himself last night to the majority of America, and here's the case that he made.
Why are you defending private insurance? Say they like their private health insurance, by the way. It should be noted that 100 million Americans. I think we should be the party that keeps what's working and fixes what's broken.
If you're super liberal, super progressive, Athena, you're not going to like that. But if you're in the middle, like the majority of the party, you're listening to that and you're thinking, That's interesting. What's your read?
Well, you heard the applause he got for saying we should keep the things that are working, fix the things that need to be fixed. He's trying to be the pragmatic voice, or one of the pragmatic voices on the stage. And you're right, it's a time when a lot of progressives don't necessarily want to hear that. They don't want to hear about how difficult some of this will be. And he was trying to speak truth to that issue. The real issue for Delaney, though, of course, is that he had to struggle to get in there. He had to struggle to get speaking time, and he wasn't able to make them as much of his short time as folks like Governor Inslee and even Bill de Blasio, who made a lot of jumping in there and at one point even sort of directing the narrative of this debate. So yes, Delaney was able to show himself to be the pragmatist, but it's hard to see whether he also was able to introduce himself to voters and to give himself a chance to catch fire.
I thought the personal stories worked well. Like when I learned that Delaney's dad was a union electrician and he loved his health care, that was interesting to me, right? Or Julian Castro being raised by a single mother and him talking about the Equal Rights Amendment, Lisa Lair, as one of the first things that he would do. That garnered a lot of applause. Bill de Blasio, Mayor de Blasio, playing up, I'm the chief executive of the biggest city in America, right? Someone who's been mocked on the front pages of New York Post here, et cetera, for even running. Did he change the game for himself in a good way last night?
Well, I think this was really an opportunity for him to introduce himself for most of the country. While, you know, those of us in New York or in Washington may be very familiar with de Blasio and certainly of the mockery that he takes from some of the biggest papers in the city, you know, a lot of Democratic voters across the country may be far less familiar with him. So I think he did a really strong job of interjecting himself, of putting himself out there as someone who thinks that he can make the argument to win back some of those Trump voters, even though he is on the progressive side of things. The thing that I noticed from talking to campaigns that a lot of them have taken away from was the format. That this was not a great format for candidates who are more of those kind of storytellers, the Cory Bookers, the Beto O'Rourke's. These answers had to be crisp and they had to be sharp. And you really, there's a sense that you had to come out early with those zingers, especially because it is an open question how many viewers are ready to tune in for 4 hours over 2 nights of Democratic debates, 6 months before the first round of voting. So I think that's what we're going to see a lot more of tonight.
Mark Preston, on the issue of women's rights and equality and abortion rights, we saw what Senator Klobuchar said back, shot back at Governor Inslee, which wasn't exactly what he was saying, by the way. But how did it play?
Well, so a couple of things. One is and just to play off Lisa there, this was all about moments, manufactured moments. That was a manufactured moment. Jay Inslee was trying to distinguish himself about what he did as a lawmaker, as a governor in his state, right, to try to get legislation passed and laws put in effect that would help women. And then we saw it was taken and it was distorted and twisted, and it worked for Amy Klobuchar. I don't think it was necessarily fair, but in politics, you know, I guess life isn't very fair. But I do think we saw a lot of manufactured moments, and we're going to see manufactured moments tonight. They're not going to be as organic. They're not going to feel as comfortable, but they're going to happen.
So, Athena, what was the most effective not manufactured moment? Because I can tell. I mean, I think we can all tell when they're repeating things they've been practicing in debate prep for a long time. But there were also some very organic moments. What resonated the most?
Well, I thought it was interesting that Governor Inslee was able to really lay out his vision, explain to voters who he was. We've been talking about how this 1 minute, 30 seconds to respond format isn't great for really explaining your biography to people who aren't familiar with you. He did a very, very good job of saying, look, I'm all about climate change. I'm about these other things as well. Here's who I am. And he used his 5 or 6 minutes very, very well. Same thing about Mayor de Blasio. But it was Castro who certainly was clearly prepared with a plan to make a name for himself and to draw contrast, particularly with Beto O'Rourke.
It was interesting that Inslee didn't say the biggest threat to the globe right now is climate change. That's his entire platform, right? He said it was Donald Trump. All right, guys, thank you very much. Mark Preston, Athena Jones, Lisa Lair, we appreciate it. All right, ahead for us. CNN gets rare access inside of a Texas detention center where right now children, those migrant children, are being housed. This is after reports of just deplorable conditions in there for the kids. We'll tell you what our reporter saw ahead. We're moments away from the opening bell on Wall Street. Investors are Going to be watching Boeing this morning after a new problem was discovered with that 737 MAX aircraft. The flaw now expected to delay again the plane's return to the skies.
Before the Bell is brought to you by E-Trade, the original place to invest online. And go to cnn.com/beforethebell to stay on top of the markets and sign up for the daily newsletter.
Flight number 417 is behind.
You should be mad at airports.
Where's gate 87?
You should be mad at non-seasoned travelers.
And they took my toothpaste away.
And you should be mad at people who take unnecessary risks.
He's my emotional support snake.
But you're not mad because you have E-Trade, whose tech helps you understand the risk and reward potential on an options trade.
It's a paste. It's not liquid or a gel.
And even explore what-if scenarios.
Here's gate 87.
Don't get mad. Get E-Trade and start trading today.
Here at IHOP, we're sticking to what we know best. Pancakes. Pancakes with all-natural Black Angus beef. And wow, we even have a pancake with a pancake in it.
Try one with unlimited fries, starting at $6.99. IHOP.
Summer's not the time for making bucket lists. Bookers know summer is for booking it. Like booking a beachside resort and ordering 2 more tacos than you need to. Check. Showing the deep end who's boss. Check. Starting a scooter gang with the fam. Check. Awesome. Bookers know summer won't last forever.
You're gonna thank me.
So be a booker at Booking.com, the world's #1 choice for booking accommodations.
Bear presents Tough as Walls.
That's some great paint.
That's some great paint.
That's some great paint.
Behr, ranked #1 in customer satisfaction with interior paints. Paint, prime, protect, all in one. Now that's some great paint. Right now, get incredible savings on Behr premium paints and stains, exclusively at the Home Depot.
When did you see the sign?
When I needed to create a better visitor experience.
Improve our workflow.
Attract new customers. That's when Fast Signs recommended Fleet Graphics.
Yeah, now business is rolling in. Get started at fastsigns.com.
We have to be able to repair the enamel on a daily basis. With the new Pro Enamel Repair toothpaste, we can help actively repair enamel in its weakened state. It's innovative. My go-to toothpaste is going to be Pro Enamel Repair.
Pella Window Designs. They're tested from -40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit and subjected to wind-driven rain. They're even engineered to stop hurricane debris from penetrating your home. All with distinctive style that goes beyond the ordinary. Pella Windows and Doors. Perfectly beautiful.
Country at war with itself as white supremacy takes to the streets. CNN investigates why white supremacy is showing its face.
Most people would not consider you white.
But it's not a popularity contest, is it?
State of Hate, Sunday at 8.
Ever notice there seems to be a Berge Chevrolet everywhere you go?
Because our customers say their experience here was like no other.
At Berge Chevrolet, you're always treated like family.
And we'll take the time to find your best price.
Right now at Berge Chevrolet, you can lease a new Silverado 1500 for only $279 a month.
Let us help you find the Chevy car or truck that you want.
Like a new Chevy Trax, lease for just $139 a month.
Find out what a difference a dealership can make at Berge Chevrolet.
Ready to start.
I'm worried about this match.
Show me sucker stats. They're using a back four formation, which would keep their attack in check. Unless, of course, they crowd our side of the pitch with attacking midfielders to support their forwards.
What if they decide to... What if they find out...
It's Xfinity's Summer of Soccer, and with the bilingual voice remote, experiencing soccer is simple, easy, awesome. Now Xfinity gives you access to the most 4K Ultra HD programming. This is CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Welcome back. This morning, Congress is still clashing over the humanitarian crisis at the border and what they'll actually do about it as time is running out for a deal. In the meantime, CNN has been granted rare access to this detention facility. It's in Clint, Texas, where just days ago, hundreds of children were reported living in really deplorable, filthy conditions. Lawyers demanding the Trump administration be held in contempt. Nick Valencia toured the facility. You got in, and I know, Nick, your cameras were not allowed in, but what did you see for yourself?
Yeah, no cameras inside, Poppy. That was part of the agreement to allow reporters inside. They say that was because of the safety and to protect these child migrants. When I saw inside, this facility is only meant for 106 migrants. We saw 117 there. And last week, when those legal monitors visited, there was 250. I couldn't imagine trying to cram in any more people from what we saw in the cells, 9 cells in all, and some of them were clearly over capacity, between 20 and 24 migrants in a cell, some of them sleeping on the ground, children as young as 1, 2 years old. Many of them looked like they had been through some very hard days recently. They looked disheveled. In fact, one had bloodshot eyes, another had yellow eyes and appeared to be sick but wasn't isolated. There were items that were put out in plain sight for us, things like toothpaste and toothbrushes. Initially, before we saw the migrants in the facilities where they were being held, we were taken through a galley where they showed us the pallets of food that were given to the migrants. They say 3 times a day, 2 times a day they get snacks as well. We did ask if anything had changed in this facility from last week, if they especially cleaned up for us in our visit. We were told that the environment was the exact same when the legal monitors visited last week. But a Customs and Border Protection source tells me that they did prep for our trip. And from my vantage point, Poppy, I could say that the environment in there smelled sterilized, almost like a hospital. That Customs and Border Protection source adding that it is an endless cat and mouse game with Customs and Border Protection. Poppy.
Look, if it did get better because you were coming, I'm glad it did for the sake of the children in there. But that's why these spontaneous visits, like by the IG, et cetera, are so important. Nick Valencia, it's such important and good reporting. Thank you very much. Let's talk about this with Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell of Florida. Good morning to you, Congresswoman. I'd like to begin with your reaction to Nick's reporting, what you just heard, what he saw, because you represent Florida's 26th district. That, of course, is where the Homestead Migrant Child Detention facility is. It can hold 2,300 children. Elizabeth Warren went there yesterday. Bill de Blasio was there today. So you have seen a lot personally as well.
Yes, and you bring a very important point that what they do in these facilities is that they're not allowing us entry when we show up. I tried to show up when I was sworn in back in January, and they said that I had to follow a 2-week policy period to request to enter the facility. So I've visited now the shelter. No, it's not a shelter. Let me make that correction. It's a detention facility. It's a prison-like facility that's holding close to 3,000 kids now between the ages of 13 and 17 years old. Mm-hmm. It's overcrowded. They are getting food that you wouldn't feed your kids every day. And it's being managed right now by a for-profit company. The administration gave a contract to a company where John Kelly is one of its shareholders. John Kelly, if you recall, started the family separation policy. And now we're detaining kids in this facility and knowing very well that many of them, I would say over 85% of them have family members, parents, aunts and uncles that are here in the United States, but there's no incentive of reuniting them.
So, Congresswoman, you this week have reiterated your call for this facility that you just mentioned, the Homestead Migrant Child Detention Facility, to be closed. And you've just outlined many of the reasons why. But if that were to actually happen, what would you do with these 2,000 children? Where would they go?
Poppy, 85% of these kids have family members living in the United States. Now, there's about 20% of the kids that are in the facility that may not have sponsors or family. We would move them to smaller facilities. There's no reason why they're in a prison-like facility. It's going to cause mental and emotional harm that we can't really measure at this point. So I know that there are several agencies like Catholic Charities, Our Kids in the state of Florida that can take in, not all of them, but many of them. They need to be living in a home-style facility, getting good public education. They're not even receiving education in the facility. I've toured it and they show me classes, but it's in a tent, extremely loud, basic education that they're providing for the kids. We need to move these kids out of this prison-like detention facility and place them with their family members instead of paying $2 million a day to a for-profit company that's managing the Homestead Detention Facility. Now, I just want to make one point very quickly.
You heard the fight. It was a fight, debate, if you will, between Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke over Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, something that's been law in this land since 1929, I think, but not really enforced until the Bush administration. And the essential question is, should it be criminal to cross the southern border, to cross into this country as an immigrant illegally, or should it be a civil violation? Beto O'Rourke comes down on one side. Julian Castro says this should be repealed. Beto O'Rourke does not go that far. Who is right?
Poppy, I think that Julian is reacting to the fact that we are treating immigrants that are coming to the border requesting asylum as criminals. They are not criminals. There is U.S. and international law.
Congresswoman, just for the sake of time, just a straight answer on it's beyond, as he said to Beto O'Rourke, beyond just the asylum seekers. He thinks that this should be repealed entirely, 1325, which would stop crossing over of undocumented immigrants from being a crime, from them being held criminally liable for that. Is that right?
I think our priority is to have border security. I am not at this point willing to change that specific provision.
Okay. Let me ask you finally, in the control room, if we have the picture that I am just wondering if it's actually going to change anything in Congress of the father, young father, and his 23-year-old daughter, this picture. Jim and I were saying on the show yesterday, Congresswoman, that, this reminded us so much of Aylan Kurdi, that young little boy that washed up on the shore in Turkey fleeing the violence in Syria. Right? That is a moment that everyone wondered, would that change that crisis? And I wonder, is this picture, let's keep it up, is this the moment that actually gets all of you in Congress to perhaps give up some of what you believe in to get something passed, to get this funding to help migrants? Does this change anything?
This is such a heartbreaking picture. I'm not seeing it right now, but just thinking about it breaks my heart because I have seen it. I would hope that all of us put the safety and the well-being of our children first.
So that's a yes, you hope so. I guess we'll see. We have days to go.
I don't know how to teach compassion and sympathy and love to those that can see that picture and turn their heads. I don't know how to change people's hearts, but.
Congresswoman Debbie Murkazil Powell, I appreciate your time very much this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. South Carolina, a crucial state where Democrats are working very hard to gain support, with more than 20 candidates there just last weekend. So how do voters in that state think those 10 candidates did on the debate stage last night? We'll take you live to South Carolina next.
Here are even more reasons to join T-Mobile. 1, do you like Netflix? Sure you do. That's why it's on us. 2, unlimited data. Use as much as you want, when you want. 3, no surprises on your bill. Taxes and fees included. Still think you have a better deal? Bring in your discount, and we'll match it. That's right. T-Mobile will match your discount.
Since my DVT blood clot, I was thinking, could there be another around the corner? Or could it turn out differently? I wanted to help protect myself. My doctor recommended Eliquis. Eliquis is proven to treat and help prevent another DVT or PE blood clot. Almost 98% of patients on Eliquis didn't experience another. And Eliquis has significantly less major bleeding than the standard treatment. Eliquis is FDA approved and has both.
Don't stop Eliquis unless your doctor tells you to. Eliquis can cause serious and, in rare cases, fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve or abnormal bleeding. If you had a spinal injection while on Eliquis, call your doctor right away if you have tingling, numbness, or muscle weakness. While taking Eliquis, you may bruise more easily, and it may take longer than usual for bleeding to stop. Seek immediate medical care for sudden signs of bleeding like unusual bruising. Eliquis may increase your bleeding risk if you take certain medicines. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures.
What's around the corner could be surprising. Ask your doctor about Eliquis.
From each individual to every team, HR Solutions from Ultimate Software show you the whole picture, so you can keep everything working in harmony. Ultimate Software, people first.
Wow, that's Ensure Max Protein with high protein and 1 gram sugar.
It's a sit-up, banana, bend at the waist. I'm trying. Keep it up. You'll get there. Whoa!
30 grams of protein and 1 gram of sugar. Ensure Max Protein.
Discover. Hi, do you have a travel card? Yep, our Miles card. Earn unlimited 1.5 miles and we'll match it at the end of your first year.
Nice. I'm thinking about a scuba diving trip.
Ooh. Or not. You okay?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Earn miles. We'll match them at the end of your first year.
This is not just a headache. This is not just a fever. This is not just the flu. It's meningitis B, and you're not there to help. While meningitis B is uncommon, once symptoms appear, they can progress quickly and can be fatal, sometimes within 24 hours. Before you send your teen to college, make sure you help protect them. Talk to your teen's doctor about meningitis B vaccination.
Jen and I are obviously a bit behind converting the den into a nursery.
Hey, I know a good contractor who could probably help you guys out.
Can you verify their credentials, check their customer reviews, give us some additional quotes? Oh, and our AC's been making...
You can't expect your neighbors to do everything HomeAdvisor can. So just ask HomeAdvisor.
Red Lobster's new weekday win menu is here. 5 days, 5 deals for $15. Get a different deal every weekday till 6 p.m. Like Endless Shrimp Monday, Admiral's Feast Tuesday, 4-Course Feast Wednesday, and more. 5 days, 5 deals, $15. See you before 6.
We call it the Mother Standard of Care. It's how we bring real hope to our cancer patients. Like Viola. When she was diagnosed with breast cancer, her team at CTCA created a personalized care plan that treated her cancer and strengthened her spirit. So Viola could focus on her future, their future. This is how we inspire hope. This is how we heal. Cancer Treatment Centers of America. Appointments available now.
We arrived at the moon 4 minutes early. Speaks well for the booster.
Of course, South Carolina is a key primary state for the 2020 Democratic candidates. Just last week, nearly all of them were in Columbia, South Carolina, making their case to voters at the annual Fish Fry. So after last night's debate, what do they think of half of the contenders now? CNN correspondent Marty Savage is on the trail in Greenville, South Carolina. I always think it's interesting to watch the debate with other people who aren't news junkies. Here is his story.
At a pub called Conley's in Greenville, South Carolina, Democrats gather for debate round one.
I want to learn more about all of the different candidates.
I want to be able to refine and kind of pick out which one seems to be more electable, really, at this point.
A lot of them do have really similar positions, but I think this is their opportunity to really take assertive stances and kind of make themselves stick out.
But for the first half hour, the crowd seemed to find few standout moments. That changed when the split screen started, as the candidates took on each other, like when Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro debated on immigration.
I'm still talking about everybody else. But you're looking at just one small part of this.
You like that sparring back and forth?
Absolutely. I think it's important, again, for citizens to be able to see the differences between where they stand.
Who won that one?
I think Castro did. He has more experience, but he hasn't been on the national stage as much.
In fact, It was the lesser-known candidates that seemed to stand out the most for these Democrats, like the congressman from Ohio.
I noticed you were watching, I think it was Tim Ryan. It was sort of...
I really like Tim Ryan.
What did you like about what he was doing there?
He's fiery.
And Hawaii Representative Tulsi Gabbard, a combat veteran. She earns respect in this state with strong military ties.
She's lesser known, but if you look at her compared to the other candidates, she's poised, she's presidential. I think saying a little less and saying it well might be more in the end.
Most of the crowd didn't stay for the full 2 hours. Only a handful hung on to the bitter end.
I think there's a lot of good ideas that bringing back the country to civility, to truth.
And for these Democrats, round one didn't provide any knockouts or clear-cut winners. Only more to ponder.
I think it helped me better understand overall the candidates, not just the general ideas of what they stand for, but the actual policies that they're going to implement. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow and seeing the other 10 candidates.
There was a lot of excitement, by many of the Democrats here. They truly know that this is a different phase of the election process here. Less scripted and a little more less predictable. Most people here are not trying to find the one. They're trying to just narrow the list, whittle it down to maybe their top 5. Whether last night helped, I don't know. Tonight, I think, is looked upon as more kind of the front runners that South Carolina voters look at. We'll see what they think tonight. Poppy.
Yeah, it'll be another interesting one, I'm sure. Marty Savage, great reporting. Thank you so much. We do have a new development this morning in the sexual assault allegations against the president. The New York Times is reporting that 2 women who the writer E. Jean Carroll confided in about an attack she says happened more than 20
We're the Tennies.
We're the Hells, and we're USAA members for life.
Get your USAA auto insurance quote today.
Cancer is the ugliest disease mankind has ever faced. We got the idea that if we took 2-dimensional patient imaging and put it in holographic displays, we could dissect around the tumor so we can safely remove it. When we first started, we felt like this might just not be possible. But Verizon 5G Ultra Wideband will give us the ability to do this.
It's time for our lowest prices of the season on the Sleep Number 360 smart bed. It senses your movement and automatically adjusts to keep you both comfortable. The Queen Sleep Number 360 C4 smart bed is now $12.99. Save $400 plus 0% interest for 36 months and Saturday.
This simple banana peel represents a bold idea, a way to create energy from household trash. It not only saves about 80% in carbon emissions, it helps reduce landfill waste. That's why BP is partnering with the California company Fulcrum Bioenergy to turn garbage into jet fuel, because we can't let any good ideas go to waste. At BP, we see possibilities everywhere to help the world keep advancing.
All of the fresh fruit, veggies, and nuts that go into Arby's pecan chicken salad are sliced daily in our store, but not the love we put into it. We can't slice that in half. It's too humongous.
Arby's, we have the meats.
For sandwiches.
COPD makes it hard to breathe. So to breathe better, I started with Onoro.
COPD tries to say, go this way. I say, I'll go my own way with Onoro.
Once Daily Onoro contains 2 medicines called bronchodilators that work together to significantly improve lung function all day and all night. Onoro is not for asthma. It contains a type of medicine that increases risk of death in people with asthma. The risk is unknown in COPD. Onoro won't replace rescue inhalers for sudden symptoms and should not be used more than once a day. Tell your doctor if you have a heart condition, high blood pressure, glaucoma, prostate, bladder, or urinary problems. These may worsen with Onoro. Call your doctor if you have worsened breathing, chest pain, mouth or tongue swelling, problems urinating, vision changes, or eye pain while taking Anoro.
Ask your doctor about Once Daily Anoro to start treating your COPD.
Go your own way. Save at Anoro.com.
These family stories are just implausible. I mean, what kind of hijinks are they going to get us into next?
Family is like jazz.
Because it feels like you're making it up as you go along?
No, because it sucks.
The Detour, all new Tuesdays at 10:30 on TBS and the app.
Cloud gutters cause damage to your overhang and trim, landscaping, flower beds, your foundation. Look at Leaf Guard, the gutter that never clogs, guaranteed end of the month, into the savings. $59 down, $59 a month. Leaf Guard on your home. $200 Visa gift card as a bonus with purchase. And if you call today, a $50 Restaurant.com gift card with your free gutter inspection. Also ask about our fascia wrap for special savings. Leaf Guard this month, $59 down, $59 a month. Don't you miss out.
Red, white, and blue? More like red, white, and woo!
It's the 4th of July Super Sale at NTB. Through July 4th, buy 2 tires, get 2 free when you purchase our value installation package. For a limited time, use your store credit card and get a $75 mail-in rebate and pay no interest for 6 months. Oh, say can you see the savings on top tire brands? Buy 2 tires, get 2 free. Plus a $75 rebate and no interest for 6 months. The 4th of July Super Sale at NTB. Wow.
All right, this morning we're learning more about the sexual assault claims against President Trump from the writer E. Jean Carroll. 2 women whom she confided in at the time of the alleged incident are going public with their stories this morning. In a New York Times podcast interview, those women give detailed descriptions alongside E. Jean Carroll of what they say she told them. Here is one account from her friend, Lisa Birnbach.
I remember her saying repeatedly, "He pulled down my tights. He pulled down my tights," which got me to think that was as far as it went. Honestly, you did say he put his penis in me. And I said, my face just did it. What? He raped you? Oh. And you said, he kept pulling down, he pulled down my tights. He pulled down my tights.
Wow. Carroll came forward last week saying that President Trump sexually assaulted her in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room in the mid-90s. The president has vehemently denied these accusations, said she's lying. Joining me to discuss, CNN political correspondent Sarah Murray. Okay, this is 2 of them sitting alongside of her. What else did they say?
That's right. And, you know, I spoke to both of these women before they were ready to come out publicly, and now they're sharing these accounts. They're letting their names be used. And Lisa Birnbach had this really interesting account because she was the first person E. Jean Carroll told. She's a writer. She's an author. She wrote the official Preppy Handbook. She's a journalist. And you hear her there talking about sort of this like tights moment that was really stuck in E. Jean Carroll's mind right after it happened. For Lisa Birnbach, her big takeaway was, you were just raped. You need to go to the police. Here's what she told her friend.
It was an episode. It was an action. It was a fight. It was not a crime. It was, I had a struggle with a guy.
Well,
It's
you
happened
felt
to me
you
before.
felt you encouraged it, probably.
Oh, yeah, I know I did. I know I did. Oh, advise you, fabulous. Lingerie, great. The story, it was getting better and better. It was getting better and better.
So you felt responsibility for what had happened?
100%.
I think we got the wrong soundbite there, but that was her talking to Lisa Birnbach, E. Jean Carroll and Lisa Birnbach, going back and forth about, you know, essentially why she didn't come forward sooner. And I think one of the things we've watched as this has played out is E. Jean Carroll is still sort of reckoning with what happened with her, with the idea that, you know, she encountered Donald Trump. You know, this is, again, her version of events. Donald Trump denies it. She encountered Donald Trump and, you know, thought it was going to be this funny thing. Right. He was going to try on this lingerie, and she just felt like she kind of egged it on and was playing along, and in some ways blames herself.
Yeah,
which
well,
of
so
course,
many victims feel that way.
So many victims do. But, you know, I think it's so powerful to have her friends now speaking on the record, because the other person that she shared her story with is Carol Martin, who was a longtime anchor, news anchor here in New York. So these are both journalists, both people, you know, who don't actually tend to make up facts, and who remembered these phone calls and done these sit-downs with E. Jean Carroll some 20 years ago when it happened, and I do think we have the right soundbite now of Lisa Birnbach and recalling basically trying to encourage her friend to go to the police.
Okay.
I said, let's go to the police. No. Come to my house. No, I want to go home.
Right.
I'll take you to the police. No. It was 15 minutes of my life. It's over. Don't ever tell anybody. I just had to tell you.
And of course, Poppy, you know, I mean, it's not uncommon for people not to report assaults like this. And E. Jean Carroll was getting, you know, very different guidance from both friends. Lisa Birnbach was saying you should go to the police. You should say that this is rape at the time. And her friend Carol Martin, she says this in this podcast with the New York Times, told her, this guy will bury you. Even Donald Trump at that time has so much power, so many more lawyers than you do. You should just forget it. You should bury it away. And that's basically what she says she's done for the last 20 years.
Thank you for that reporting. And you spoke to them even before they went on the record here with that. Sarah, thank you very much. All right, we're waiting. It's almost 10 a.m., and that means we are moments away from the Supreme Court, set to deliver several major cases that will impact all of us. Stay with us for the latest.
Health is magnificent. So are the traits you love about your breed. But behind them are health needs you may not see. Royal Canin believes in tailored nutrition to ensure his long back and playful spirit get the joint support they need. Or to help this gentle giant keep her heart going strong. We've developed over 200 formulas to support the magnificence that makes them, them. Find the right formula for your pet at royalcanin.com.
The decision was made. We were making a move. We had to. We knew that if we came in too high, it would cost us big time. We had to stay low. And boy, did we. We locked it in and rode that low rate from Navy Federal Credit Union all the way to our first house. It's a split-level ranch. So cute.
Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission.
Hi, I'm Joan London. Today's senior living communities have never been better, with amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And there's never been an easier way to get great advice. A Place for Mom is a free service that pairs you with a local advisor to help you sort through your options and find the perfect place. A Place for Mom. You know your family, we know senior living. Together we'll make the right choice.
When did you see the sign?
When I needed to jumpstart sales.
Build attendance for an event.
Help people find their way. Fast Signs designed new directional signage.
And got them back on track. Get started at fastsigns.com.
Last year, the internet told IHOP to stick to pancakes. Well, here they are. Pancakes with all-natural Black Angus beef. Isn't that right, Mr. Pancake?
It's a pancake!
But that's a...
Try one starting at $6.99. IHOP.
Oh, hey. Buying a car from Vroom is so easy. All you need is a phone and a finger. Just scroll through amazing hand-picked low-mileage cars, then tap to buy. That's it. No sales speak, no wasted time. Just straight-up great cars, each with its own Carfax. Right from your phone to your driveway. Thousands of cars priced below market value. Go to Vroom.com and pick your favorites. Oh yeah, she digs it.
Behr presents Tough as Walls.
That's some great paint.
That's some great paint.
Behr, ranked #1 in customer satisfaction with interior paints. Right now, get incredible savings on Behr, exclusively at the Home Depot.
My mom washes the dishes before she puts them in the dishwasher. So what does the dishwasher do?
Cascade Platinum does the work for you. Pre-washing and removing stuck-on foods the first time.
Wow, that's clean.
Cascade Platinum.
The deli scene, when we first did it, Meg rightfully was a little nervous about it. You got crew members standing around.
Are you okay? Rob says, here's what I want. He proceeds to have an orgasm that Mighty Joe Young would be jealous of.
Yes, oh God, I'm pounding the table.
Yes! Yes!
And I realized, because my mother is sitting there, I'm having an orgasm in front of my mother.
I'll have what she's having.
The movies we love and the stories behind them premieres July 7th on CNN.
It's not about volume. It's about winning clients who become friends.
They're greeted by name. It's a warm feeling.
We have the greenest cars, the most reliable, and the safest. When people do their research, that's the type of car that they want for them or their family.
Lease a 2019 Honda Civic for $198 a month, a Honda Odyssey for $289 a month, or a Honda CR-V for $239 a month.
JL3 Honda Montgomeryville. Simply exceptional.
They say we're young and we don't know. We won't find out until we grow. Well, I don't know if all that's true. 'Cause you got me and baby, I got you.
You protect them at home?
Baby,
we help protect them online.
I got you.
This is
baby.
beyond Wi-Fi. This is XFi. Simple, easy, awesome. Xfinity, the future of awesome.
State of Hate, the explosion of white supremacy, Sunday at 8.
All right, top of the hour at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. I'm Poppy Harlow. Jim Sciutto is on assignment. He will join us from the G20 tomorrow morning. But at any moment, crucial decisions are coming from the Supreme Court. The High Court is set to hand down major rulings on the Trump administration's plan to add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. And another big one coming on partisan gerrymandering. Let's go to the Supreme Court. My colleague Jessica Schneider is outside. Good morning. This is the final day. This is a big day. Let's begin with the census decision.
Yeah, you know, Poppy, notably, this is the final day of the first term with a solid conservative 5-4 majority. And like you said, we're waiting for some huge cases with huge political implications. Notably, first and foremost, the question of whether the Trump administration can add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. And really, time is ticking here. Census officials have said that they need to get started on the printing process for the 2020 census by July 1st. That's within just a matter of days. And the Supreme Court heard these arguments in April, and at the time, the conservative justices really seemed to lean toward allowing this question. They said that it was well within the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross's right to include this question. But since then, there has been a lot of evidence that has come out, particularly by the ACLU, that they presented in a different court. They say that they found evidence that there were political motivations behind adding this question. And while this is all being decided at the Supreme Court, we could know within minutes. There's also another case that's playing out in Maryland. A judge there has been asked to issue an injunction on this question by tomorrow. So that could be playing out in another court, depending on what the Supreme Court does here. So a lot of hot political topics. And what's interesting, Poppy, is just a few weeks ago, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg gave a speech, and she said that she expects that we will see closely divided opinions on these closely watched cases. So that is exactly what we could see here. For weeks, we've been on edge waiting for these big cases. Now the moment is here, and we wait and see.
They are coming today in this hour. We know that. Jess, before you go, the Supreme Court until now has never truly defined partisan gerrymandering. What is too far? They've never drawn that line. Today, we expect that they will.
It's possible. You know, a lot of proponents would like the Supreme Court to establish a test as to when politicians go too far in drawing these congressional and state district lines for political gain. It's possible that the Supreme Court will finally issue this test, but it's a very difficult test to establish. The Supreme Court may in fact dodge it and issue a decision on different grounds. It all remains to be seen. There's really a lot of ways that these cases, the census case, the partisan gerrymandering case, a lot of different ways that these could go. So we're waiting, and we will see in just a few minutes.
We will let you hop on that call, find out, come back to us. Jessica, thank you very much. As we await these decisions, let's bring in our experts. Our chief legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, is with me this morning. The president of the Constitutional Accountability Center, Elizabeth Windra, joins me, and CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein. Good morning to you all. This is the day. Jeffrey Toobin, let's begin with census. It has huge implications for everyone in terms of where money goes in districts, how maps are drawn, how you're represented in Congress. For anyone watching or listening, this matters to you. And the central question here about, what, can be done according to the Commerce Clause of the Constitution also comes to the issue of motivation, Jeff, right? Was there political motivation to add this or not?
Well, there are different ways the court could look at this. I mean, the narrow way is, did the
Trump administration follow the appropriate procedures in adding the citizenship question. The court could simply deal with it that way. The larger question is it a violation of the Constitution to ask this question for a political motivation? Because, I mean, look, everyone should understand the backdrop to this whole issue. What the plaintiffs have claimed, and what there seems to be a considerable amount of evidence for, is that the Commerce Department, the Trump administration, added the question about citizenship so people of color, especially Spanish-speaking people, will not answer the census. They will be afraid of being harassed. They will be afraid of immigration enforcement. They simply will avoid being named in the census. If people of color, who tend to be more democratic, don't answer the census, those districts will be less represented in the Congress and the state legislatures. And they will get less money from the federal government. Right. That's the political backdrop to this case.
And Jeffrey, I want you to continue on that, but I would just add to it, right? We know, because I believe it was 6 different census officials warned that by asking this, it would jeopardize the count.
Right. The question is that a bug or a feature? Is the reason they added the citizenship question to get fewer Spanish-speaking people named, or is that sort of an unfortunate side effect? That's one of the issues the court might address.
Okay. So to you, Elizabeth, also here at the crux of all of this is whether or not the court is going to delay. The ACLU has said either rule in our favor here, essentially, or delay until the fall. You've got this letter this week from the Solicitor General, Noel Francisco, saying the DOJ says this is a bunch of baloney, essentially, and we have to print this thing now.
Yeah, you know, this is really a pressure cooker for Chief Justice Roberts and his court. We've seen Roberts try to make his court seem like it's not political, but he is finding himself right in the middle of this political issue. As Jeffrey just laid out, it is incredibly important for electoral representation and also for communities to get these funds that go towards safe roads, schools, healthcare, etc. And so what Roberts is going to be faced with is whether he just pretends that this administration did not engage in these shenanigans, which the lower courts said were unlawful, that the Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, did not act in good faith. That's a big deal when you're talking about something as important as the census. It might sound boring, but it is incredibly important to our democracy.
Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, has maintained, Ron Brownstein, that he has acted well within what he can and can't add here to the census, but this is political as well, and that's your expertise on this. We have the House Oversight Committee just recently finding Wilbur Ross and the Attorney General Bill Barr in contempt because they refused to turn over documents to address some of these questions, to address the question about, did this Republican redistricting expert, Dr. Hofeller, in 2015 directly impact this, right? Was his research on this the motivation here? And that is the question.
Right, absolutely. And of course, we'd know more about Wilbur Ross's motivations if the Supreme Court had not blocked him from being required to give a deposition in the case. Look, the evidence is very powerful here. I mean, this Commerce Secretary, claimed for a long time that the Justice Department asked him to add the citizenship question so it could better enforce the Voting Rights Act. In fact, the evidence is the opposite, that he solicited that request from the Justice Department, that he consulted with the hardest liners on immigration, like Chris Kobach and Steve Bannon, before adding the question. I mean, for people who view the goal of, who recognize Make America Great Again as an attempt to kind of restore an earlier America, this is in some ways the ultimate expression of that, because you're defining the growing diversity of the country out of existence. You're not counting it. And to Elizabeth's point, this really is a critical moment for John Roberts, because on the one hand, he has said often, we're not a political court. He doesn't want to be seen as a political court. But in fact, on these issues that affect the underlying rules of the competition between the two parties, the Shelby County decision in 2013, Citizens United in 2010, the voter purge and Texas redistricting decisions last year. He has been repeatedly willing to engineer 5-4 party line rulings that benefit the interests of the Republican Party. And this is perhaps the ultimate case of that, because this will affect not only the allocation of seats, as Jeffrey noted, within states, but among the states and the reapportionment. So places like California will lose representation
just to jump in
and
here,
electoral college votes.
Very quickly, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg has warned about that division, potentially more 5-4 decisions to come at the end of this term. We'll see what these counts are. Jeffrey Toobin, I've just learned that the Supreme Court has just issued the ruling on partisan gerrymandering. Of course, this is significant for a number of reasons, including the court has never settled on a standard or a test for what is partisan gerrymandering. You've got two cases here, Toobin, as we wait for the ruling to come down. You've got the North Carolina case brought by the Democrats and the Maryland case brought by the Republicans. Explain to people what we're about to find out as we await the decision.
Well, this is another case where the interests of the Republican Party in particular are at stake, because especially after the 2010 census, when the Republicans controlled states like Florida, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, some of which they don't control anymore, they drew the lines so that the Republicans, even though they were very evenly divided in terms of overall voters, overwhelmingly controlled the state legislative districts. That and the question in this case, and we'll know the answer soon, is that constitutional? Is it constitutional to draw district lines that dramatically advantage one party or the other? The Maryland case, the Democrats did it, but the Democrats don't control as many states as the Republicans. So the question, which the court, as you point out, has never clearly resolved, is we know it's unlawful to discriminate on the basis of race in drawing district lines, but is it constitutional to draw lines based on partisan affiliation? That's the issue in this case.
It's a First Amendment question, equal protection question, but Jeffrey Toobin, they may not. The high court, right? They may not decide to finally set a standard or a test for that, right? They may punt it back and say this is better decided by the political branches of government. Is that right?
Well, but that's a decision. If the court says, if the court says we're not getting involved, we're going to leave it to the legislature, the legislators will continue partisan gerrymandering. So, not deciding is deciding.
Elizabeth, to you, why should every American care about the decision that is about to come down on this front, right? Because it comes down to state legislatures, et cetera.
I mean, it is a basic American principle that the voters choose their elected representatives and not the other way around. And if the Supreme Court does not step in to say whether or not partisan gerrymandering is unconstitutional, then they are really turning a blind eye to that, because we know that it happens. It happens on both sides, but as Jeffrey said, right now it is definitely being used more by the Republican Party. And if, as he said, if Chief Justice Roberts and his court decide not to decide, that is really going to help the fate of the future fate of the Republican Party as the demographics change. This goes hand in hand with the census case, because we're seeing ways that the Republican Party is trying to change the system so they can still stay ahead even with the changes in our country.
All right, let me jump in. Jessica Schneider has the ruling for us. Jessica, what did the justices decide?
Well, Poppy, this may be the exact example of what Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was referring to a few weeks ago when she said to expect closely divided decisions in closely watched cases. This is the case involving partisan gerrymandering. This was a 5-4 decision written by the Chief Justice John Roberts, and it says that the courts have to stay out of these questions of whether maps are extremely partisan gerrymandering. Basically, the court saying here that the courts have no role to play, and that means that all of these maps that challengers have said were partisan gerrymandered, that politicians went too far in drawing these lines for strictly political gain. The court saying courts cannot rule on this, that this is strictly within the purview of Congress. So it's quite a stark ruling here, 5-4, all 5 conservative justices taking this stance that courts have no role to play here. The issue here is that the Chief Justice writes in this majority opinion that this is strictly a political question, that the courts have no role in deciding whether or not politicians can draw these maps and how they can draw them. Lower courts here had thrown out these maps. This was a case involving maps in North Carolina as well as a congressional district in Maryland. And the lower courts, the federal judges, had thrown out these maps. They had established a new standard. And the Supreme Court today going in the complete opposite direction, not establishing a standard and instead saying that the Supreme Court and any other court has no role to play. They cannot decide whether or not these maps that challengers accuse politicians of partisan gerrymandering, the courts cannot step in. They cannot decide. And really, this throws it back to Congress to make any determination as to whether or not any sort of standard should be set. But really, the practical effect of this is that now it gives free rein to politicians who take control of state legislatures to draw the lines how they see fit. And any court challenge cannot be mounted because the Supreme Court saying that this is purely a political question and that the courts should not step in here, Poppy.
Jeffrey Toobin, that's exactly what you were just talking about. To punt it back to Congress is making a decision. This opinion written by the Chief Justice John Roberts, who said just back in February, quote, people need to know that we are not doing politics. He has now decided there is no role for the courts in deciding how these maps are drawn. And again, as Jessica said, right down the line there, the 5 conservative justices siding with Chief Justice John Roberts, who wrote the majority opinion.
2 points. One, a huge victory for the Republican Party here, because it's the Republicans who control most of these states, who control Ohio, who control Florida, who will be redistricting following the 2020 census. And now this is a green light to jam all the Democrats into a handful of districts and put the Republicans in control of all of the rest of them. Second point, this is why, in very significant way, the country is so divided along partisan lines. That what we have now are state legislative districts and congressional districts where it's clear a Democrat is going to win in some seats and it's clear a Republican is going to win in the other. So that the only important election in those districts are the primaries, meaning moderates need not apply. That you are going to get more conservative Republicans and more liberal Democrats in state legislatures and in the houses of Congress. This decision is a major contributor to the polarized political society in which we live, and it's only going to get more polarized because of the green light that Chief Justice Roberts gave to state legislatures today.
This is the final word, Ron Brownstein. So a more divided America now going forward?
Absolutely. Look, this is what we're talking about. What I was talking about before. For all that John Roberts talks about the court not wanting to seem political, when it comes to setting the rules of politics, he has repeatedly engineered these 5-4 decisions with 5 Republican-appointed justices, not just conservatives, outvoting 4 Democratic-appointed justices to set the rules of politics from Citizens United to Shelby County to this in a way that benefits Republicans. And it might go even further because there is a countervailing movement in the states. We're up to about 20 states now that have voted, usually by ballot initiative, to redistrict through an independent commission rather than letting the legislature draw these kinds of lines. And there was a case, as Jeffrey knows, a few years ago where John Roberts voted with 3 other Republican-appointed justices to invalidate the use of those independent commissions. Since Anthony Kennedy voted with the Democratic-appointed justices, the independent commissions, it was a case involving Arizona, were allowed to stand. But it's pretty clear that John Roberts, I think, would vote to eliminate that. And now with Brett Kavanaugh on the court, it's not clear that he will allow even those kinds of independent commissions to draw the lines going forward, since he voted the other way, saying that they were unconstitutional. And, because I think this ruling will spur that kind of reform, or at least an effort at that kind of reform in more states. Because as Jeff said, it is an absolute green light to states to be as aggressive as they want to be in redistricting. And that is something that the Republican Party employed to the max after the 2010 landslide that they had and the redistricting that followed.
Elizabeth, we heard a foreshadowing of a decision like this from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg just a few weeks ago, who compared what she called the huge importance of the census decision, which we'll get in just a few moments, to the fight over the travel ban, and talked about the concern over divisions like this, 5-4 division, saying, given the number of most watched cases still unannounced, I cannot predict that the relatively low sharp divisions ratio will hold. And that's exactly what happened here.
Right. And, you know, it seems like a division ideologically, but it also, I think, is a division in who has their head in the sand and who doesn't. You know, like we saw last year with the Muslim ban case. The conservative majority went forward as if this was any other presidential administration, that President Trump did not have his tweets saying that the Muslim ban was intended to attack Muslims. And here I think we have, first with this partisan gerrymandering decision, Chief Justice Roberts trying to make it seem like he's not doing politics, but in reality, he's absolutely doing politics, because as we've just heard from both Ron and Jeffrey, this will only make polarization worse. And frankly, as a constitutional lawyer, I'm deeply disappointed that the court did not do its job in our constitutional system and apply the Constitution and the law. You have these plaintiffs coming to the court saying, our First Amendment rights are being violated, our equal protection rights are being violated because we're being marginalized based on our political affiliation and being packed into these districts. And the court basically denied their ability to come into the Supreme Court and have the Constitution enforced. And that's the Supreme Court's job. And I don't think they did it in this case.
And Jeffrey, I think you brought up a really salient and important point at the top there, and it's about the decision made previously on racial gerrymandering and what's allowed there versus political. So explain why the court decided one way in racial gerrymandering and this way on political.
Well, the Constitution, says there can be no racial discrimination.
Right.
I mean, but as Chief Justice Roberts points out, the Constitution says nothing about political discrimination. Now, the fact is, in the real world, since African Americans are overwhelmingly Democratic, the line between racial discrimination and political discrimination is almost impossible to draw. And Democrats have been pointing out for years that, in fact, political discrimination often is racial discrimination. But Chief Justice Roberts was not interested in that argument. He said when Democrats, draw lines to benefit Democrats and Republicans draw district lines to benefit Republicans, that's not the court's business. The Constitution has nothing to say about that. That is simply a political question, not a legal question, and we're going to stay out of it. But the bright line that Chief Justice Roberts draws in this opinion between racial discrimination, which is illegal, and political discrimination, which is legal now, that line may not exist in the real world.
Well,
go ahead,
Poppy.
Yes.
I would say last year in the Texas case, as Jeffrey knows, they narrowed the use of racial discrimination to challenge district lines. And the Abbott versus Perez, I think, was the name of the case. And of course, Shelby County, the landmark, probably one of the 2 or 3 most significant decisions of the Roberts Court, eliminated the pre-clearance provisions of the Voting Rights Act, which were designed to prevent racial discrimination. So it's not as if they are a bulwark against racial discrimination in electoral processes and are only kind of allowing partisan manipulation to go forward. On both fronts, they are rolling back the ability to constrain this kind of behavior, and it is a pretty consistent pattern. I quoted someone in my story this week noting that on these cases you begin to get the evidence begins to accumulate that what the 5 Republican justices on the court are doing is building a perpetual motion machine. Releasing a series of rulings over a period of years that benefit the Republican electoral prospects and thus make it more likely that it will be Republicans picking the justices.
So to that question of, what is just and unjust, Chief Justice Roberts just addressed that in his majority opinion. Let me read you part of it as I go to my colleague Jessica Schneider. Jess, this stands out. Quote, excessive partisanship in districting leads to results that reasonably seem unjust, but the fact that such gerrymandering is incompatible with democratic principles, Arizona State Legislature, does not mean that the solution lies with the federal judiciary, saying it might seem unjust, but we can't solve this.
Well, and that's exactly the holding in this opinion today. And he continues on to say, Poppy, and this is important in the opinion, saying our conclusion does not condone excessive partisan gerrymandering, nor does our conclusion condemn complaints about districting to echo and to avoid. And then he goes on to talk about how the states are addressing this issue, how a number of commissions have been set up in the states to address this issue of redistricting and claims of extreme partisan gerrymandering. So the court saying here, we have to stay out of this. This isn't our lane. This is a political question. This should be handled by Congress, also by state legislatures who are in charge of drawing these lines. But you know, Poppy, I mean, this is a sharply divided court right now, and this really is the first major case that we've seen this break. 5-4, this solidly conservative majority, and we're really feeling the effects of Justice Anthony Kennedy's retirement just 1 year ago. Justice Kagan is on the bench right now reading her dissent forcefully. This is something that justices really only do. We've seen it more and more lately, but justices really only do when they have a very forceful dissent and when they're very passionate about their dissent. I'll read you briefly what Justice Kagan is reading up on the bench right now. She says, "Of all times to abandon the court's duty to declare the law, this was not the one. The practices challenged in these cases imperil our system of government, and part of the court's role in that system is to defend its foundation." So the 4 liberal justices here, Justice Kagan reading from the bench right now, slamming this decision by Chief Justice Roberts and the 4 other conservative justices to stay out of this. But Justice Roberts, in his opinion, defending that decision, saying that this is not the role of the courts to decide this, and instead let this play out in the states that have already established commissions, in the state legislatures, and perhaps even in Congress. Poppy?
Jessica Schneider, great reporting. Thank you very, very much for that. And it sure says a lot that she is reading that dissent from the bench. As you know, we are going to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. We are awaiting the census decision from the High Court. Stay with us.
CNN Newsroom, brought to you by Orkin. Home is where the bugs aren't.
As a real estate agent, I've learned it's excess moisture that causes musty odors. Pro tip, use Damp Rid.
New Damp Rid drop-in tabs attract and trap excess moisture out of the air, eliminating musty odors.
Works every time.
Get rid of dampness.
Damp Rid.
Hey, who are you?
Oh, hey, Jeff, I'm a car thief.
What?
I'm here to steal your car because, well, that's my job.
What?
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 It happens. And if you got cut rate car insurance, paying for this could feel like getting robbed twice. So get Allstate. I'd be better protected from mayhem. Like me.
Thanks, Golden Corral. Dan gets a slow smoked sirloin, and my little trio are as happy as shrimp. Oops, clams. And Mom got it all. Hook, line, and sirloin. The slow smoked sirloin and shrimp trio. Golden Corral, the only one for everyone.
This is Rick Blomquist. His life is pretty comfortable. Then he laid on a Serta and realized his life was only just sorta comfortable.
I've been living a lie.
The Serta iComfort Hybrid Mattress. Not just sorta comfortable, Serta comfortable.
They're America's biopharmaceutical researchers, pursuing life-changing cures in a country that fosters innovation. Here, they find breakthroughs, like a way to fight cancer, by arming a patient's own T-cells. Because it's not just about the next breakthrough, it's all the ones after that.
People with type 2 diabetes are excited about the potential of once-weekly Ozempic. In a study with Ozempic, a majority of adults lowered their blood sugar and reached an A1C of less than 7 and maintained it.
Oh, under 7?
And you may lose weight. In the same one-year study, adults lost on average up to 12 pounds.
Oh, up to 12 pounds?
A 2-year study showed that Ozempic does not increase the risk of major cardiovascular events like heart attack, stroke, or death.
Oh, no increased risk.
Ozempic should not be the first medicine for treating diabetes or for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not share needles or pens. Don't reuse needles. Do not take Ozempic if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Ozempic. Stop taking Ozempic and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, itching, rash, or trouble breathing. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis. Tell your doctor if you have diabetic retinopathy or vision changes. Taking Ozempic with a sulfonylurea or insulin may increase the risk for low blood sugar. Common side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and constipation. Some side effects can lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
I discovered the potential with Ozempic.
Ask your healthcare provider today about once-weekly Ozempic.
Hey, allergy muddlers. It's here. Do your sneezes turn heads? Try Zyrtec. Zyrtec starts working hard at hour 1 and works twice as hard when you take it again the next day. Zyrtec. Muddle no more.
And try Children's Zyrtec for consistently powerful relief of your kids' allergies.
This is the couple who wanted to get away, who used Expedia to book the vacation rental, which led to the discovery that sometimes a little downtime can lift you right up. Expedia, everything you need to go.
Here's another reason to join T-Mobile. Get unlimited data and texting in over 210 countries and destinations. And here's another reason to join. Bring in your discount, and we'll match it. That's right. T-Mobile will match your discount.
The movies we love and the stories behind them. A new CNN original series premieres July 7th on CNN.
Welcome back. We're continuing to follow a major decision from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court deciding in a 5-4 decision that it will allow severe partisan gerrymandering to continue. Let's bring back in our experts. And Jeffrey Toobin, to you, a little bit more from Chief Justice John Roberts, who wrote the majority opinion here. He said, our conclusion does not condone excessive partisan gerrymandering. Well, Justice Kagan, who's reading her dissent from the bench, says gerrymandering is, as so many justices have emphasized before, anti-democratic in the most profound sense. So Americans this morning watching this and wondering, is there any way of truly dealing with partisan gerrymandering now? What's your answer to them?
Well, you know, Chief Justice Roberts makes an interesting reference. I mean, he recognizes how terrible this all looks. He recognizes how unseemly it is the way politicians use gerrymandering to lock in the district. But he says, look, it's not the job of the courts. And then he says something very interesting towards the end of his opinion. He says, look, there are a lot of interesting proposals out there to deal with gerrymandering, including independent commissions that have been adopted by some states that kind of take it away from the state legislatures. There's one like that in California. Mm-hmm. There's one like that in Iowa. And he says, aren't these interesting proposals? But what's curious about that, and Ron mentioned this earlier, is that in a different case earlier, when Chief Justice Roberts was in the minority, he said those commissions were unconstitutional, that the state legislature had to do it itself. So I don't know if Chief Justice Roberts
is that the Arizona?
Yeah, the
decision?
Arizona case. You know, I don't know if he's changed his mind about those or he's simply blowing smoke to try to distort the impact of this decision. But, you know, those independent commissions are probably going to get a lot more support than they have now. Yes. But it remains unclear whether they're constitutional as well.
Right.
So that could be another test that the court faces. Yes, Ron.
I was going to say, right, the logical response to this ruling is that you're going to see more efforts in states. I think we're up to 21 states that have taken redistricting away from the legislature to some degree. And clearly you're going to see more efforts toward that effect. But as I mentioned, and Jeff just filled out a little bit, the Chief Justice in the past voted on the losing side of a 5-4 decision to invalidate exactly those kinds of independent commissions. The fifth vote, joining with the 4 Democratic appointed justices, was Anthony Kennedy, who has now been replaced by Brett Kavanaugh. So it's not clear that those independent commissions can survive another legal challenge, which may come from Republicans and conservatives in some of these states. It's also important to note how these two cases intersect, because in the census case, the evidence from Thomas Heffler the dead Republican, the deceased Republican strategist files is that Republicans want to use the citizenship data in the census to change the way districts are drawn from all people to just eligible citizens, citizens who are of voting age, which would also enormously compound the effect of moving representation away from highly diverse areas toward areas that are more preponderantly white and generally more Republican. So this census case could be an accelerant of what we see in the gerrymandering case, because if they do decide to allow the citizenship question, you will see, I think, conservative states try to shift the way they redistrict and who they count in that.
And Elizabeth, to Ron's point about how, and what you said earlier, they are related in that sense. And we're waiting for the census decision that will come down in just a few moments. But just talking about the impact here of Justice Kennedy no longer being on the court. Remember in 2015, it was Scalia, I believe, who wrote the majority decision. They're essentially saying that the court that a map challenging extreme gerrymandering, right, which was the question here, was not reviewable. Okay, but Kennedy left the door open in 2014, and he wrote that he would not foreclose on all possibility of judicial relief if some limited and precise rationale were found. But that door has now been closed. I'm hearing we're getting a ruling on census. You guys let me know when we can go to Jessica on that. Until we can, this is a sea change because Kennedy's no longer on the court. Elizabeth.
Right, exactly. And so you have, this conservative majority being much starker in their decision than they would have, I think, if Kennedy were on the bench, still keeping the door open. And, the court knows how to make decisions when it comes to the law. As Justice Kagan said in her dissent here, it's the court's job to declare what the law is. They can deal with somewhat gray areas. I think Chief Justice Roberts is playing a little too cute here by saying they can't weigh in because there's no clear standard. I mean, we know kind of that famous rule on obscenity, you know it when you see it. That didn't stop the court from saying that it could apply the law in those cases. And here there's a lot of really good data and evidence showing that these are extraordinarily manipulated districts in ways that affect our constitutional democracy. And one thing that Ron said when we get the census decision is to keep in mind that all people, citizen or no, whether you can vote or not, are to be counted for political representation under the Constitution. When you're drawing those lines, everyone, children, non-citizens, whether you can vote or not, is supposed to be represented by our leaders. And so what we're seeing here, exactly as Jeffrey and Ron have said, is this attempt by conservatives, generally the Republican Party, to narrow that, to exclude communities of color. And that is deeply, deeply problematic for what we hope is going to be an inclusive American democracy.
Okay, Jeffrey Toobin, the court has ruled on this census case. We'll find out what they have decided and how that division is among the justices in just a moment. This is the administration, the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, saying we have the right to add a question to the 2020 census that asks, are you a citizen or not? And we're doing it to better comply with federal voting rights laws. Critics say this is a veiled attempt to intimidate non-citizens and depress response from especially Hispanic households, and that has an impact on money and representation in Congress, etc. How big is this?
Well, it's potentially very big, but it's also related to the gerrymandering question because, particularly in the last a couple of decades, Republicans in particular have used the rules on gerrymandering, the rules on the census, to try to limit the number of people of color who are counted, who have meaningful representation in Congress and in state legislatures and in how federal money is divided. So these cases are intimately bound up with each other, and they are about locking in Republican domination of government regardless of what the voters want. Both of them have that as the political, I wouldn't even call it a subtext, I'd call it the text of what's really going on in these cases. And we know that the Republicans won in the partisan gerrymandering case, and we are waiting to hear from Justice Jessica Snyder what happened in the census case.
And these can be very complex, so we're taking our time. That team is going through them.
Well, we should.
You can look down and read it too, Jeffrey, in the moments you have off here to give us your analysis. Elizabeth, to you, people might not know, but this question was on the census until 1950, right? So that's also a big part of what the court is. Go ahead, Ron. Go ahead, Ron.
It's never been asked to the whole country. I believe there's testimony
yes,
from
exactly.
it has never been asked in the way that the administration wants to use it. So there really is not precedent. And in fact, go ahead.
Explain. Go ahead. I mean, Go ahead, Elizabeth, and explain that difference that Ron is saying. It has not been asked to the whole country in this way.
Yes, so there have been some questions asked in other inquiries that the Census Bureau puts out, the community surveys, but there's never been this question specifically. And, especially when you're talking about the way in which the administration is supposed to make decisions by putting forth its actual reason, that is the issue that's before the court here. We have an Administrative Procedures Act which says that the court has to put forth its reasons for decision making. The administration has to put forth the reasons for its decision making. And here we have very good evidence to think that they say they're doing this to enforce the Voting Rights Act. You've never needed this question to enforce the Voting Rights Act. We've had certainly administrations who have been very pro-Voting Rights Act who have not needed to put this question on the census. And so the question is, what is their real reason? And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the Trump administration's reason is discriminatory and also to help the Republican Party.
Ron Brownstein, what is going to be fascinating here, along with the key decision from the court, is what they are going to do, or what they do about what the ACLU has presented, which they call all of this additional evidence that came after oral arguments, right, about this Republican redistricting expert and the work that was done and the communication that person had with the Trump administration before he died, and the Maryland case.
Well, the Maryland, right, because, this is an administrative procedure case. They're accused of violating the Administrative Procedure Act, and the lower courts have found a lot of evidence that they did exactly that. The Maryland case, as I understand it, raises a different objection about kind of overt racial bias in the adding of this question. And there's no doubt, Poppy, as you know, census experts themselves have predicted that this will lead to a massive, a significant undercount, particularly of Hispanics. I know the Urban Institute estimated that there could be a significant undercount of Hispanics and African Americans in the census in 2020 for a variety of reasons, including the addition of this citizenship question. So this is something that just has enormous consequences. The Trump administration this week asked the court at the last moment to not only rule in their favor on the administrative procedure, but to preempt the other potential litigation around racial bias. And, we'll see if they are willing to go that far in a request that came in. But the evidence that has come out about the intent of this question, both the partisan and the racial logic and motivation behind it, is so powerful that a 5-4 party line decision on this, I think, will resonate, as strongly as Citizens United or Shelby County, which are the other two kind of landmark setting the rules of politics decisions in the John Roberts era.
Jeffrey Toobin, to that point, and the back and forth this week between the administration and the courts on this one, you had an appeals court saying that the new evidence presented in this, in the Maryland case, warranted re-examination of the case. A few hours after that, the Solicitor General, Noel Francisco, shot back with a letter disputing that, saying the court has to make a decision. We can't wait. We can't punt to the fall. We've got to print this thing now.
Ms. Harlow, may I ask for a delay? I am actually trying to read the opinion.
Okay, fine.
And it's complicated.
Go.
And I want to be right rather than fast.
I want you to be right. It's always best to be accurate and not fast. So let's take Jeffrey off the screen. Jeffrey, you go ahead and read. And Elizabeth, let me go to you on that one.
Swipe right.
So Poppy, I think that's a great question. Look, this administration has been pushing and pushing the Supreme Court, and for them to ask the court, this is a little bit wonky, but for the Solicitor General of the Trump administration to ask the court to rule for them on an issue that has not been briefed before them is an extraordinarily hubristic act. And, I think that we've seen from the Trump administration over and over, Trump tweeting things that suggest he thinks he has the Supreme Court in his back pocket. I can't imagine Chief Justice Roberts likes that very much. And so I think when we, get into the meat of the census decision, we will have to see whether the court is stepping back and saying, we're taking our heads out of the sand, or if they're going to say, we're going to keep taking your word on these things, that if you look at real life, you have to admit that the evidence, again, is so strong that the motivation for this question here was not to enforce the Voting Rights Act. It was to try to exclude particularly Hispanic Americans, non-Hispanic whites, and to empower non-Hispanic whites, and also Republican candidates. So if you look at reality, and I hope the Supreme Court does that, in addition to, of course, applying the Constitution, which says that all people should be counted in the census. This is going to be an incredibly important decision. And at a certain point, the American people are watching the court, and they want them to be this non-political institution that applies the law. But we're seeing a chipping away at that over and over, from the Justice Kavanaugh hearings, which were troubling to many Americans, to political rulings like Citizens United and Shelby County striking down key portions of the Voting Rights Act. And so this decision, Americans are watching, and it's going to be incredibly important.
You're right.
Poppy.
Ron, go ahead, and then I have a follow-up for you.
I was going to ask real quick, the larger context of this. I mean, it's impossible to divorce these decisions from the demographic context in which they are occurring. I mean, the under 18 population is projected to be majority kids of color by 2020. 2023 or so, a majority of the high school graduates will be kids of color. By 2030, a majority of the population under 13 will be non-white. And this is one of many decisions in which you have these 5 Republican-appointed justices who are nominated and confirmed by Republicans who are primarily representing the parts of America least touched by this demographic change, that are making rulings that will constrain, I think, the potential to constrain the influence of that growing, diverse America. And Shelby County was certainly that. The rulings on affirmative action touch to that, but nothing goes to that more directly than this census question, which is really an attempt to define out of existence this changing America in a way that, as Thomas Heffler said, benefits Republicans and non-Hispanic whites. I mean, this is about holding power despite demographic change by setting the rules of politics in a way that minimizes the impact of that change.
So you bring up an important name in all of
that's a form of stress coming ahead.
Ron, you bring up an important name in all of this that I'm not sure that the average American is fully briefed on. So let's just explain it to them as we wait carefully for this decision to be explained to us by our experts. Dr. Thomas Heffler, he was a Republican redistricting expert. He wrote a study in 2015 that said that this redistricting would be advantageous to Republicans and non-Hispanics to use citizen voting age, as you bring up. Many people didn't see these documents until he died. His daughter discovered them on thumb drives. They came to the attention of the ACLU, Elizabeth, which brought that issue to the high court. But until today, and we don't even know if the justices will do it today, the ACLU has not responded to that issue and whether they'll consider that in this. Hold that thought. Jessica Schneider, my colleague, is outside of the Supreme Court. Jessica, what did the justices decide on this question of can citizenship be added as a question to the 2020 census?
Poppy, the justices in this ruling saying, for right now at least, the Census Bureau cannot go forward with putting this citizenship question on the 2020 census. That doesn't mean it won't happen eventually, but for right now, as we face up against this July 1st printing deadline, the Supreme Court is saying, hold on, we need more explanation from the Commerce Department about why they want this question added, and we're going to send it back to the lower court. That's the Southern District of New York, the federal court in Manhattan. This is quite astonishing, really, because of this tight deadline that we're under. Today is June 27th, and the Census Bureau had said that it needed to start printing these questionnaires for the 2020 census by July 1st, within a matter of days. But the Supreme Court is saying here that it is within the Commerce Department's right to include a citizenship question under the enumeration clause of the Constitution, which is better known or otherwise known as the Census Clause, which lays out how the census census will be conducted, it is within their power to add this question. However, they need to adequately explain it. And one of the key portions of this opinion here, it says we cannot ignore the disconnect between the decision made and the explanation given. And that really points to this question here as to whether or not there was improper political motivation. In the lower courts, we heard testimony, we saw documents. It was unclear as to how exactly this decision to add this citizenship question was reached. And then, of course, within the past few weeks, we've seen this other evidence be discovered and be presented at the lower courts. The Supreme Court that I've read so far doesn't exactly address that evidence, but it does raise some question here as to whether or not the Commerce Department, as to whether or not the Secretary, Wilbur Ross, was being completely truthful as to why they added this question. So really, Poppy, this could continue to play out throughout the next few days, weeks, throughout this summer, because this will go back to the court in the Southern District of New York, where the judge there will hear evidence. It's important to know when the judge got this additional evidence from the ACLU, the judge there said, this is disturbing evidence. This is important evidence here, but I'm not going to step in because the Supreme Court is considering this question. Well, now this judge in New York has the green light from the Supreme Court to reopen this case, to explore this evidence, and then we'll see how this plays out if eventually this citizenship question is added. But it will not be for now as we face that July 1st deadline. Poppy.
And will a decision be made by the time the 2020 census actually does finally have to be printed? Jessica, before you go, do we know the count on this decision? Was it a 5-4 decision? And don't worry if we don't know yet.
There were different counts. This was affirmed in part as to standing, reversed in part as to some of it. So we're still going through the exact counts as to all those broke down. So we'll get back to you on that one.
I understand.
But it was written by the Chief Justice, John Roberts.
Okay. You broke it down so well. I'll let you get back to reading. Jessica, thank you very much, and jump in when you have more. Jeffrey Toobin, to you. Question of motivation and honesty here.
Okay. I've now read the opinion, which helps,
Great.
or at least I've read enough to understand what it is. Basically, what the court has done, and it did this unanimously, is they said back to the judge in the Southern District of New York, and that's a judge named Jesse Furman. He's a relatively recent appointee to the court by President Obama, and they basically said, look at this issue again, because the evidence is disturbing and not entirely clear, and we don't really know the answer on the issue of political partisanship. But if you read all the, if you look at the full context, it certainly looks like, to me anyway, that the citizenship question at the end of the day is going to wind up on this questionnaire. If you look at what the more conservative justices wrote, and there are 5 of them on the court, it looks like the question is going to wind up on the surveys. Now, it is also everything is controversial in this case, including the deadline, because one version of the deadline is that it's July 1st, but another version of the deadline is that it's October.
Right.
So it is not necessarily the case that Judge Furman in New York needs to resolve this by next week. There is also another version of the facts here that says the census questionnaire could be resolved in October, not by July 1st. But this is not a total victory for the administration. But it's certainly, reading these opinions, it suggests to me that the administration is probably going to win by the time the census goes out next year.
Well, but if it's the October deadline, let's say it's that deadline, which would be the latest one, Jeffrey, this is the end of their term, and they're not going to reconvene again until the fall. So would they have, if this came back up to the Supreme Court, or would the lower court's decision stand?
What? My goodness. You mean the Supreme Court might have to work in the summer? Is there something like unconstitutional about that? I mean, it is really an unbelievable thing that we sort of take it for granted that the Supreme Court is entitled to take the summer off. Wouldn't it be nice for all of us? But in fact, the next thing that's going to happen is not at the Supreme Court. It's going to go back to Judge Furman in New York, and he's going to have to get briefs, probably hold some hearings, and he's going to have to address these questions, and then it will come up back to the Supreme Court, and maybe the precious vacation for the justices will not be interfered with too much.
Maybe. Elizabeth, to you, what's your read on this? Do you have the same read as Jeffrey does, that this ultimately may mean that the citizenship question, we'll see, maybe ends up there?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I think that with the Supreme Court's decision here, the eyes of America are on this issue like they've never been before. And as the case goes back to the lower court, we're going to see additional evidence, clearer evidence that, frankly, the American people will be paying more attention to because of the Supreme Court ruling today. And even before we got this new evidence from this deceased Republican strategist that the citizenship question was there to help the Republican Party and to empower white voters over voters of color, there was already disturbing evidence in the record that Secretary Ross was not acting for the reasons that he put forward to the court. He claimed first that the census officials were the ones who asked him to put the question on the questionnaire. They made clear that that was not the case, that in fact it was coming from the administration to put the citizenship question on there. So there's already a lot of disturbing evidence out there, and I think as even more comes to the fore as the case goes back to Judge Furman, who has done a spectacular job in this case, I think that the pressure on the Supreme Court is going to be even greater. And as they face some of the backlash from their Muslim ban ruling, I think they're going to be extra sensitive here.
Ron Brownstein, the final minute goes to you.
Look, this is just an enormously important decision, one that really gets to the question of how we deal with a changing America. And I think, as everyone has said, there is going to be a lot more focus on it. And I haven't read the decision, but I would assume this means that the racial discrimination side of it can go forward as well out of Maryland. So it may be both of these issues coming to the court. The 5 Republican-appointed justices indicated during the questions they were inclined to let the administration do this. But as Elizabeth said, the evidence is so strong and continuing to come out that it will be an even starker choice if they allow it, if they ultimately allow it, because I'd be surprised if the lower courts allow this question. It will probably be an issue of the Supreme Court overturning them if it gets onto the census this fall.
Thank you all very, very much. 2 incredibly consequential decisions from the Supreme Court this morning. We appreciate it all. Jeffrey Toobin, Elizabeth, Ron, to you and Jessica, just for her stellar reporting outside the court. That is not an easy job. Thank you all for joining me. Jim and I will see you back here tomorrow. He's in Osaka at the G20. We'll have live coverage from there. Kate Baldwin picks up our coverage after this.
Breakfast wants you back. Try Just Crack an Egg, packed with diced potatoes, veggies, meat, and cheese. Just add a fresh egg for a hot scramble in less than 2 minutes to get those warm, fuzzy feelings again. Take breakfast back. Find it in the egg aisle.
Muddlers. It's you. Do your sneezes turn heads? Try Zyrtec. Zyrtec starts working hard at hour 1 and works twice as hard when you take it again the next day. Zyrtec. Muddle no more.
And try Children's Zyrtec for consistently powerful relief of your kids' allergies.
Whatever your dream, just keep chasing it. In the Honda CR-V. With available features like hands-free access power tailgate, turbocharged engine, and sharp, stylish interior. The Honda CR-V Touring. Hurry into your Honda dealer to find a great deal on a 2019 KBB.com Best Buy.
If you live with diabetes, why fingerstick when you can scan? With the Freestyle Libre 14-day system, just scan the sensor with your reader, iPhone, or Android and manage your diabetes. With the Freestyle Libre 14-day system, a continuous glucose monitor, you can check your glucose levels anytime without fingersticks. Ask your doctor to write a prescription for the Freestyle Libre 14-day system. You can do it without fingersticks. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
The pecan chicken salad and ultimate BLT sandwiches from Arby's. It's like eating a whole farmer's market.
Arby's, we have the meats.
For sandwiches.
My experience with USAA has been excellent. They really appreciate the military family, and it really shows.
With all that USAA offers, why go with anybody else? We know their rates are good. We know that they're always going to take care of us.
It was an instant savings, and I should have changed a long time ago.
It was funny because when we would call another insurance company, they would say, oh, we can't be USAA.
We're the Weber family.
We're the Tennies.
We're the Hells, and we're USAA members for life.
Get your USAA auto insurance quote today.
If your dishwasher doesn't get dishes completely dry, try Finish Jet Dry's new stronger formula. It dries 100% better than detergent alone, even plastics. Get dishes drier than you ever thought possible. Try Finish Jet Dry.
A country at war with itself as white supremacy takes to the streets. CNN investigates why white supremacy is showing its face.
Most people would not consider you white.
But it's not a popularity contest, is it?
State of Hate, Sunday at 8.
At North Penn Mazda, we don't receive awards, we earn them. And now you can save big during the season of discovery. Lease the 2019 Mazda 3 Select all-wheel drive for just $215 a month. Or lease the 2019 Mazda CX-5 all-wheel drive for just $205 a month. Two great ways to save at North Penn Mazda during the season of discovery. The right experience, the right choice. Route 309 in Colmar.
Good things come to those who wait. At QVC, we say better things come now. Get it now. Pay over time, no extra charge with Easy Pay. The best news? You can use it on everything. Yes, everything. All the great brands you love and new products you'll discover. So why wait? It's Easy Pay every day, only through June 30th. Shop QVC and QVC.com.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. Thank you so much for joining me. We have huge news out of the Supreme Court this morning. Two major decisions being handed down just minutes ago. The justices, in one, handing down a decision against the Trump administration, at least for now, and it is complicated and important, in the administration's effort to add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. Critics have long said that with this effort, the administration had purely political motivations by attempting to reduce the headcount of non-citizens. The other big decision also is promising major political implications throughout the country and in Washington, of course. The Supreme Court saying the Constitution does not allow courts to weigh in on how voting maps are drawn, even in the most extreme cases that give one political party an advantage over the other. It's called gerrymandering. We're going to get to it. CNN's Jessica Schneider is outside the Supreme Court. She's joining me right now. Jessica, let's start with the census decision. That it is complicated. It is important. What are the justices saying here?
The justices are saying that the citizenship question on the 2020 census, for now, is blocked. The Census Bureau cannot move forward at this time with printing those questionnaires that contain a question asking of a respondent's citizenship. That's not saying that this administration cannot indefinitely add the citizenship question, but the Supreme Court here is saying that it needs to go back to the lower courts for determination. Basically, the Supreme Court in this 5-4 decision authored authored by the Chief Justice John Roberts, is saying that yes, as it pertains to the Constitution and the enumerations clause, which is the clause that lays out the conditions for the census that's taken every 10 years, under that clause of the Constitution, the Commerce Secretary can, in fact, it is within his right to add this citizenship question. However, it has come under some question as to the exact motivations, political or otherwise, as to exactly why this question was added. And the justices talk about this in their opinion. Chief Justice John Roberts puts it this way. He says the sole stated reason seems to have been contrived. Then goes on to say that we cannot ignore the disconnect between the decision made and the explanation given. Again, the ACLU has presented evidence in recent weeks in another court saying that there were improper political motivations here, that maybe there was some influence from a now deceased Republican redistricting expert that if they had only counted the citizen voting age population, that it would be advantageous to Republicans and non-Hispanic whites. So that has been a big question clouding this entire case. So now, Kate, the justice is here saying we are not going to decide this right now. Instead, we are going to toss it back to the lower court, the Southern District of New York. The federal judge there has already been presented with some of this evidence. He said that he was concerned, troubled by the evidence, but as it's been presented over the past few weeks, he said he would not yet step in, waiting for the Supreme Court to rule. So now the Supreme Court has ruled. They have tossed it back. It remains to be seen whether or not the census question will be in and how quickly this could actually transpire. But for now, it gets bounced back to the lower courts. Kate.
Yeah. For now, it's a no. That does how soon that could head back, that question could be added back in, how soon it could end up back at the court, that remains to be seen. But the other very big decision coming from the court this morning, it has to do with partisan gerrymandering, and the court saying pretty clearly its position on this one.
It is. It's saying it can't have a position on this question. In a 5-4 decision, again written by the Chief Justice and breaking along those ideological lines. It was 5 conservatives to 4 liberals. The Chief Justice here saying that it is not within the purview of the courts. This is a purely political question. This is only for Congress, for state legislatures to decide. The Chief Justice also saying that it's not that we don't think this is an important question. However, this is being handled, he said, by the states, by commissions within the states. However, the liberals quite saddened, actually. Saddened was the word that Justice Elena Kagan used in her dissent. She took to the bench. She read her dissent, basically saying, with respect but deep sadness, I dissent. And she said this, Kate, of all times to abandon the court's duty to declare the law, this was not the one. Talking about how this issue of partisan gerrymandering, whether or not politicians can orchestrate and kind of rejigger district lines for political gain, she says that it is important for the court to weigh in, but they are not doing so here, leaving it instead, these maps intact, and the decision really at the state level. Kate?
It's fascinating, though, because it also seems that in the majority decision, they do applaud the different types of efforts that there are, commissions, independent commissions, kind of applaud those efforts, right?
Yes, that's exactly what the Chief Justice said. He said, let this play out in the lower, or in the states with those commissions. They can figure it out. This is not a question for the courts.
Fascinating. And I want to get into, Jessica, thank you. Great, amazing work. Please keep bringing us important information. This stuff is complicated when you're reading through these decisions.